Professor Marlen Mouliou, Assistant Professor of Museology at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, the Department of History and Archaeology. She is also a member of the Special Interdepartmental Committee of the Postgraduate Program in Museum Studies at the same university, responsible for the public archaeology activities organized in the context of the University Excavation Project in Marathon near Athens. Since 2016, she has been a member of the panel of judges for the European Museum of the Year Award and Vice Chair of the European Academic Heritage Network. She has also served as Secretary and Chair of the International Committee for the Collections and Activities of Museums of Cities. And within this context, she has been co-coordinator of the project Migration Cities, Immigration, and Archival Cities. Her research focuses on multiple aspects of museums and their social value and material culture, but also on museum history and archaeology, museum policies, participatory interpretation, archaeological ethnographies, and local communities. In 2020, she launched the initiative The Museum Inside Me, one of her developing projects to advocate the value of museums. So, Professor Mouliou, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Aris. Thank you, Elena, Aris, and Vangelis, for this wonderful invitation to this so meaningful and important workshop right now. Community engagement and participatory work in museums and in the heritage field generally is in the core of my work, research and practice, because I think both are interconnected, and we as researchers and academics, we not only have the responsibility to educate the new generations, but to really use our disciplines and our working practices to develop projects within the community, with the community, for the community. So during this difficult time, during the first lockdown, the experience we all lived was so strong that through this emerged, to use the word that I heard also from Mr. Marinos, the emergence of a new order of things for all of us and also for our profession. And what I will present to you today is this project, The Museum Inside Me, the way we developed it and the interesting perspectives that this kind of community projects can have. And of course, Lena gave a wonderful introduction, the theoretical framework within which we can see such an example and try to understand it more. So without further ado, I'll share my screen with you. And can you see the slides? The first slide here. Is it okay?
Yes, Marlen, it's perfect.
Okay, great. And please, because time is limited, do warn me about my time limitations. Don't let me speak too long. So the Museum Inside Me was is an example, but through this example, I hope I can raise a lot of issues that are related more generally to museums and to the way we can create through them bonding heritage. And I will start with these pictures. These are photographs from an exhibition I've seen 2 years ago in the V&A Victorian Albert Museum in London. And I use them because they bring two pertinent questions that relate to all of us. The exhibition was entitled Tomorrow Starts Here. And the first question that was there for the visitors to engage with was what makes us human? And within this framework, what are we all connected? We are humans and we're connected, but we're really engaged with each other. And another interesting insight is from this book, Reclaiming Conversation. Sherry Turkle is a social psychologist who works a lot with museums and, of course, with internet. This is her field of research. And in this book, she says that technology, which is all around us, sometimes makes us forget what we know about life. She talks about the crisis of empathy that we may have right now in society, and this is apparent more and more in different fields of life. But her argument, which is very strong, is not anti-technology. On the contrary, she's a believer in technology, but she advocates it in a way that technology can bring us together rather than takes us apart. So she's pro-conversation. The book that she published recently is all about how we can communicate with each other, create meaningful conversations, which can cure us. They can be cures in society. And this is very important. So my case is coming back to my field of museums that I've been involved all my life, almost my professional life. I see museums as safe spaces, as potentially safe spaces for this conversation that we need in society, for this connection that we need to create with ourselves and with others. And why is that? Because museums, among other things, have collections, have objects that can bring a lot of different stories to the foreground, stories that can connect us, can provoke thinking, can create feelings, can be the conversation pieces, as we say, the talking objects that can trigger meaningful conversation. Of course, museums now during this pandemic have been facing a lot of challenges, and we know all that since from the lockdown, the first lockdown, 90% of all museums globally have closed down. This has never happened before. It's the very first time after the Second World War that museums face this difficult reality. But a difficult reality that succeeded at another interesting and huge challenge for museum sector. We have been discussing for some years now, and you see in this picture the big assembly of the International Council of Museums in Tokyo last September, where we were debating peacefully about the museum definition, how we could develop a new definition for museums, a definition that would focus a lot on the values of the museums, on their polyphonic, democratizing, inclusive character, a museum that we know that we can have. A lot of museums have been developed in this engaging and open way, but we need to focus more on these aspects, and we need to really work much more on community engagement and social meaning for museums. So during the first lockdown, at the very beginning, one night as I was working with two colleagues who invited in one of my courses, and we're talking about a lot of other things, there was an idea, impromptu idea that came to our mind, how we could create a platform, a museum inverted commas, because a museum, I think, is not just a physical space. It's an idea more than anything, a concept through which we can work about life. And through this, try to promote conversation, reflection, creativity, and interconnection during a difficult period that we were facing physical distancing. And we felt this very strongly because at the very beginning, as we all know, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. We could see this in the social media that people were exchanging a lot of notes through the social media, but their messages were more burdened with difficult feelings. And we thought that museums can be healers, can be these bridges that can create the conversation that we need, and create an antidote for this isolation that we felt that we would experience more and more. So my questions for this presentation, and for generally for this initiative, I would not call it project because it was not defined as a project from the beginning. It was more like an activist reaction, a social experiment, let's say, about how museums can be a catalyst for this change, how we can use the concept of a museum as a frame of mind to create a channel of communication between us, to give us inspiration and connection that we can take in our lives every day, not just when we go to museums. So we created the museum inside me. You see the logo here, finished, but there was a process to understand how we would do that and how we would name this initiative. think fits well this dual aim objective that we set for this initiative. We wanted to create a museum of positive thinking composed of 2 photo collections in Facebook and Instagram. We wanted to use social media for free of charge. We didn't have a budget. We wanted to just explore the possibilities we have through the internet and create the museum that could bridge us in this communication during the difficult period of lockdown with the values of participatory work, very anthropocentric, very people-centered, to widen up our role, the activities in society, to enhance the exposure of museums in the public domain and their relevance in everyday life. So I gave already some outline of the principles behind the creation of the project. I'll go quickly through the practical steps we took to make it, some things about its content and meaning, the potential social impact this project could bring into the community, and how we can see museums as connectors within society as a conclusion at the end. The Museum Inside Me launched its first invitation to citizens at the end of March 2020 with this note. It was a short and straightforward note about how museums are lovable places and how we felt that we needed them in our life. They were closed down, but we didn't want to close ourselves out of the museums. So we gave 2 lines of, let's say, inspiration to the public to think about museums. One, that museums are also our own homes. They're full of memories, personal stories, full of interesting objects that we can rethink about them, see them in a different way as museums of ourselves, as the museum inside our houses. But also museums are in our memories. We can dig out these memories from our photographic albums and create a collection of photographs in Instagram that would present us in museums. The project was launched at the end of March. Today, our followers are quite numerous, and we had a lot of interaction through the Facebook site, but also through the Instagram. The collection that we started creating from day one was incredible. In the first 4 months of its operation, we had more than 170 objects and stories collected in Facebook, which were objects and stories from everyone, not from museum professionals, not from professionals in the heritage sector, and that was the value of this project. We wanted to engage everyone to think about how museums tell the stories of our lives, be them archaeological, historical, ethnographic, or the museums of ourselves and our houses. So there was a lot of interactivity at the beginning, especially because we felt that citizens were almost waiting for this initiative to happen. They immediately jumped into the opportunity. I present you here some of the stories, some of the objects that they shared with us. Their stories, the short text that went with the photographs were very evocative, very interesting, very well written, but with a personal tone, not with an academic language that sometimes makes the distance between the professionals and the society bigger. The Instagram initiative was, as I said before, photographs of museums with us inside, interacting with the museum space. The project in the Instagram was also very successful. There were a lot of interesting uploads in the stories of individual profiles. Then we harvested these stories in our own profile, the Museum Inside Me, and the objective behind this was to create positive memories about museums, to recollect memorable museum experiences, and to keep the passion of museums alive. Also, we want to educate somehow, inverted commas, our followers about museums. And so occasionally we gave quizzes and other triggers to think about museums and reflect on them. Our project attracted media attention. We gave a lot of interviews to the journalists and to the radio. I think because the project itself was so personal driven, it was so humanized in its identity. Also, it is inspired teachers to use objects with their pupils, as they were also in lockdown. They wanted to create learning material for their students. One example I present here from a teacher in Volos, who was an ex-student of mine, who created a beautiful project with his primary school pupils around it, and created a tool to use with the family. So intergeneration community engagement as well. We also wanted to bring the community we created, this virtual cyber community, together on the Day of Museums on the 18th of May. So we organized a public speech, a public forum with different followers and donors of museum objects in our museum inside me. And the conversation was very interesting, very lively, and it is still available on YouTube. So what did we harvest from this experience? We harvested quite a lot of interesting insights. We also launched in June survey with our followers to think, to sift through this survey what they really gained from this project, if there was a value in it, so that we can continue it after the lockdown. The core that was that not only they felt it was interesting, joyful, they passed some good moments doing things in the Facebook or Instagram page, but more than anything, I think this project sparked their positive thinking about museums, and also gave them a lot of healing moments. We had these findings that they felt that the project not only was original and interesting, it's very soothing and necessary as a healing process. There are lots of questions we can raise about the project. What kind of objects we collected, what kind of stories, if there were any difference between the stories shared from men or women, or from different age groups or professional backgrounds, if we can gather some information about our users. What kind of stories we had in Instagram, and more than anything, how we can capitalize, leverage this project in order to make it permanent, sustainable, and create an online community for the future around museums. It's not about any specific museum, it's more about the concept of museums and the value of museums in society. And I will finish with this slide. During the period of lockdown, and still today, there are a lot of different discussions about museums. It's amazing how this crisis triggered, as never before, our thinking about how museums can change and be even more socially engaged. This survey was run by the Museum Alliance in United States, the Alliance of Museums in the United States, and what presents is very interesting. The followers of this survey in different questions answered that museums, more than anything, more than learning spaces, more than spaces of enjoyment, during that period of difficulty, there were spaces of escape, of creating hope and creating a connection between society. So what came out was that museums are really this third space in society where we can continue being connected with each other and develop interesting and important conversations between us, and through them bring hope to society. So our project, together with many other projects that follow these values, encouraged active creation of narratives and meanings, created bonding heritage that can give us a lot of support, not only cognitive, but more than anything, psychological support, be incubators of empathy in society, and at the end bring hope and give us the healing that we often feel when we go through hardships. This is a hardship that we experience as a collective, and perhaps that's why the changes are now so much stronger and rapid. But this was an ongoing process for museums and for the cultural sector already ignited some years ago, but now it's the time to really make the big change that we need. So thank you for your listening me, and I'm really looking forward to your questions and to your ideas about the project and how we can develop it more.
This was great. Thank you very much, Marlen. It was an amazing presentation. I would like to dwell a little bit on the notion of the anthropocentric. We're going to discuss this a little bit more in the question time because we're not doing questions now. I would just like to just point out that sometimes in heritage we give a lot of emphasis on the local and the place specific, and we forget those elements that constitute a common theme between people, a common link between people. So I very much like this notion of the question of what it is to be human. I think this is an era and an age, especially after COVID-19, that this question is even more pressing. In a way, this situation has rendered us apart and at the same time brought us together, in a common humanity. So thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to questions myself. This was an incredible project.